Hello there, welcome. This is part one of our 15-minute a day reading from my travel diaries. So this is where we're going to visit a southwestern island. To get down to the coastal community of Schull on the southwest Mizzen Peninsula of Ireland from Lancashire in England required some thought. The decision to get the overnight ferry from Liverpool to Dublin proved eccentric but fun. We drove from Burnley to Liverpool and found the Gladstone dock straight away, despite the absence of signposts. P&O Irish ferries expect their passengers to be psychic, my husband muttered, turning the car away from what later proved to be the right place, and hurtling through the labyrinth of Dockland beyond our destination of Bootle. Some Eastern European men of stocky build and shaven heads directed us in pidgin English back to the correct dock. It was going dark when we finally drew up to an alienating environment of endless container trucks in the bare beams of the spotlights illuminating acres of concrete lorry park. The truckers were reversing at high speed their containers onto the huge ferry, the Norbay, a workaday functional boat. It was a far cry from the P&O cruise ships that many of our friends frequent. We were among only 6 cars, dwarfed by tens of giant commercial lorries lined up on board over several levels of decks. It was nearly 10 p.m. and time for departure, when a member of the predominantly Southeast Asian crew directed us to reverse centimetres from a gigantic truck which towered above us. The noise of trucks and the great metallic creaks and groans of the hulking great boat, which was revving up, was quite frightening. We heaved open a heavy metal door and clambered up the steel steps to the deck, where we were given our cabin key for the night. "Dinner is being served as we speak," said the amiable purser, and we found ourselves in a no-frills restaurant, surrounded by huge truckers, where we could help ourselves to unlimited hot and cold buffet meals, which were all included on the ticket. The chefs, who all looked like Gurkhas, made a mean chicken curry, but were also proficient at roast beef and Yorkshire pudding. It was quite a feast, with various unhealthy but delicious desserts and cheeses laid out. The boat set off as we munched, prompting me to consider this late-night Sunday roast might not be conducive to crossing the rolling Irish Sea. The lorry drivers, mostly looking as if they had cushions of fat strapped to their stomachs and bottoms, were a very pleasant lot. And we stood out in the night air with them on deck as they smoked their last cigarettes before turning in. We watched the twinkling dock lights recede and heard the clanking buoys with their flashing green lights against the black waves as the Norbay began to plough out of Liverpool. We actually came upon a lock, which is like our canal boat has to negotiate on the canals. And this was just such a massive, huge lock. And the Norbay went into it. The gates were closed electronically. and then the water came out, the boat lowered, and then it went out the other side of the lock. Quite incredible after our little narrow boat on the canal. In case we should be hungry, breakfast was at 4:30 in the morning, in readiness for arrival in Dublin port at 6 o'clock in the morning. We needed to stoke up for the long drive, so when we disembarked, among the lorries, our car looking like a flea on a dog, we were full of porridge, toast and prunes. Dublin was just waking up as we passed through, switching lanes to find our way towards Cork and getting cut up by the now not so friendly lorry drivers behind the wheels as they thundered towards the motorway. We had a 5-hour drive to get to Schull on the Mizen Peninsula, and naturally we would want to stop at some point for refreshments. This was not to be, as Ireland seemed to be in the grip of a road-building programme more vast and comprehensive since the Romans. We sped along the newly laid motorways that were not even yet on maps, and they had not yet built the services to go with them. Just outside of Cork, desperately in need of liquid intake and output, Paul abruptly turned up a narrow, steep lane to a very upmarket country house called the Vienna Woods Hotel. It was a rather graceful building with 1902 engraved over the door. There were tall vases of fresh flowers and marble floors. We spotted a magnificent chandelier that sparkled all colours of the rainbow. We strode in confidently, albeit somewhat dishevelled by now, and we were given a hearty welcome by a man in a black and white uniform. "Would you be wanting breakfast now?" We sank into soft armchairs and were immediately brought good quality coffee. Throwing caution to the wind, we entered the opulent breakfast room. It was only 9:30 a.m, but in fact we had not eaten for 5 hours. We were the only ones in this beautiful room of fresh flowers, brilliant white cotton tablecloths, and great silver platters with flames burning beneath them. These contained all manner of classic Irish breakfasts, including both black and white puddings. The room was decked out so that it could have been for a wedding. Dreamy chill-out music played as we tasted all they had to offer. Homemade soda bread and butter, fresh fruit salad, creamy yoghurt, as well as the whole heart attack on the plate thing known as the Irish breakfast. Bacon, sausages, eggs, mushrooms, you name it. We strolled in the grounds before setting off for Schull once again. The Lonely Planet Guide tells us that the coastal resort of Baltimore is worth a visit if you like boats and trips to the West Cork Islands. So we called in there and watched sailors, divers and drinkers having a ball. But we had to reach our B&B, bed and breakfast, Stanley House in Schull. Stanley House was recommended by the author Maeve Binchy as one of her favourite places to stay, and it did not disappoint. The owner, Nancy, immediately furnished us with a pot of tea and a piece of homemade fruit cake in the conservatory. This overlooks a spectacular undulating inlet with misty hills in the background. In the fields were a beautiful herd of deer. Beyond the deer, the bay was dotted with boats of all shapes and sizes. And we were told by a guest from New York, also taking tea in the conservatory, that a ferry ride from Skull to Clear Island is now a great way to spend time here. This lady was among that band of Americans who have Irish roots and have researched and reclaimed them. She told us how she had discovered relatives she had never met before, living and working on a farm, which she now visited every year. She said that the contrast between New York and this intimate, supportive, rural community in Ireland could not be more marked. I am now writing this aide memoir in our splendid room with sea view, and I can see a stag with impressively ornate antlers scratching his belly with them most delicately. It is approaching the rutting season, when no doubt the delicate antler movements will intensify considerably as he vies for supremacy and the hormones kick in. The sky is like a mysterious white mist which continually passes across the hills, hiding them and then revealing a glimpse of their green beauty. Sure, it's a great place, and we've arrived. Well, that's the end of the first part, and hopefully you can join me again tomorrow at 4 p.m. UK time for part 2. See you later.